Okay. Hello, everybody. It is March 16th, 2021. That's a Tuesday, and it is 11:33 Pacific time. Um, as a bit of a forewarning and PSA, please be mindful that we are currently going through daylight savings time, and that daylight savings time kicks in at a different time in EMEA than it does in North America. So right now, calendar invites are a little bit wonky, and just give it to the end of the month to clear up. I am Celeste. I am going to be the host of this meeting. And I would really love if I could get a volunteer note taker. Going once.
Give me a link,
I'll take
Celeste.
it.
I'll do my best.
Okay, do you want to put yourself in the note taker slot and
Yeah, I
take it
gotta.
away?
Do you have the? I gotta go. Is the link in the calendar invite for the?
The link is in the calendar invite.
Okay,
It's
let me go
also
find
in the
that.
chat, but I think you
Yeah, I
joined
think I
after that.
joined after you pasted it because it's not in there for me. My bad.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. Um,
Thank
okay.
you, Mark.
And this is the Language Workstream bi-weekly sync. Um, if anybody has anything they'd like to add to the open discussion topics, feel free to add it through the agenda now. Otherwise, we'll just go through the recurring topics, which is kind of general status updates and a project board review. Okay. So status updates. The first and most important thing is that we have a new co-lead for the language workstream. And I would love if you could welcome Larry up to the helm of language workstream. And I'm wondering if Larry would like to give a bit of an introduction.
Sure, thanks, Celeste. And it's co-helm with you. Not going to drive this bus, but I'm Larry Kunz, and I appreciate all the thumbs up. I work for Extreme Networks, and my background is technical writing, almost entirely in the software industry. And we started an inclusive naming initiative in our company late last year, and everybody I talked to was really super interested and said, gosh, but we don't know anywhere where there's a resource or anything like that. And then finally a colleague pointed me to the Inclusive Naming Initiative. And I thought, these are the people I need to be connecting with, and these are the people that are doing what we need. And I'm really excited to be getting in on this and helping put together a resource that will be, first and foremost, will honor the people who use our content, but will also provide content providers with a resource that is current and keeps getting up to date and provides good guidance that reflects a consensus of the community. So again, I look forward to working with everyone. And thanks, Celeste, for the opportunity.
No, I'm super excited. So first off, does anybody have any questions about that? Good, good. The second general status update for the project that I have is around a code of conduct. So we've had a couple of questions around this come up, mostly the question being we really need a code of conduct. And thank you to Joanna and Matthew for raising that to me last week as well. So something Matthew and I are going to be working on off to the side in the next couple of weeks is defining a code of conduct by which we can all work together and respect each other and proceed with professionality and care. So we're working on that, and we will hopefully have the beginnings of that ready in the next couple of weeks.
Celeste and Matt, I volunteer to help you with that if you would like help.
Okay, cool.
I regularly draft these and advise organizations on how to enforce them. So I'm happy to contribute my perspective on that.
Oh, that would be super great. Yeah. So Matthew and I have a DM right now, and I'll loop you in on that Slack message.
Okay.
Am I breaking up at all? I'm getting an internet connection unstable.
Okay. Tiny bit, but we can understand you.
Okay.
Is
I'm gonna
this a
stop
general code of conduct for inclusive naming or specific to our work stream?
General for inclusive naming.
Okay, right.
And I'm not too worried, but this is a topic which brings up intense emotions in people, and I just want to make sure that everybody's feeling respected. Okay. So project board review is kind of the next thing on our agenda right now. And before we dive into that, I want to call out an update to 2 issues. And I'm actually going to share my screen to do this. So last week, I opened up the issue of gathering initial recommendations from participating member companies and reconciling those. The update is that I've split this issue into 2, and let me explain to you why. Depending on the person's member company, there may be a legal process to clear for them to be able to publish something. Similarly, for works that are already published, but not necessarily they don't have like a member representative within this initiative, I think we still want to capture that those exist, and we still want to reference them because that's the milieu in which this work is existing. That's the current standard. So what I've done is I've split this into gather initial recommendations for participating companies. And on this, we're going to hold slightly because there's like legal and publishing ramifications around that. What I am going to do is send out an email to gather currently public recommendations and to reconcile those. Because I think there's a little less risk in referencing material that's already publicly available and providing correct attribution and credit in that regards. And that lets the work of this work stream start up while we work with some member companies about clearing any legal loopholes they may need to go through to publish things and to work with us. Does anybody have any questions?
Just to be clear, Celeste, excuse me, the initial recommendations, you're referring to each company's current list of terms and replacements and rationales. Is that correct?
That is exactly what I'm referring to.
All right, thank you.
And to that note, I would like to show you all the draft email that I'm hoping to send to the overall mailing list today. To make sure that we're comfortable with the wording. So, and I apologize, I probably need to zoom in on this. Here we go. Slightly bigger text. So I'm hoping to send this out today. I will post this in the Slack channel to let everybody have a bit more time to comment. The language workstream is ready to accept existing publicly available inclusive language guidelines. You can submit by commenting with a URL on the issue or by dropping a link in Slack to us. I gave a couple of examples of what we're looking for that's currently public. We're looking for guides like Splunk's Inclusivity Guide on writing unbiased content. We're looking for standards organization drafts like Mallory Nodal's draft. And as a third bullet point, I think we're also looking for any other frameworks and documentation. Like the language evaluation framework that Kubernetes has. The key requirement here is that it's already publicly available and you have gone through whatever clearances you require to make that publicly available. Letting people know what we're doing with them, which is, again, the plan is to kind of put these into a spreadsheet, see where there are commonalities, and then produce a set of our own recommendations based on the the consensus within those recommendations, while referencing the materials that we looked at while doing so. There's a note on what if things are not published publicly yet, which is if you know that your company has a legal way of doing something like this, please contact your company and try and go through that pathway. And if you don't, hold for now. So that's what I'm thinking of sending. Does anybody have comments on this? Would you like me to give you the URL?
I think this is Monica, and I work
Yeah.
at Microsoft, and I think I just want to make sure that, sorry for the background chimes there. I think the idea is that even if this information is public and our most recent inclusive language updates for docs and code are public, but the idea is we want to make sure that our legal teams within our respective organizations are okay with our sort of sharing that with the Linux Foundation effort and having the Linux Foundation effort ultimately say, here are guidelines that have been submitted by various organizations, and we are putting these out kind of as a recommendation. Do you know what I mean? So on the one hand, we're communicating it as through the Linux Foundation, but we're letting people know that these are contributions by multiple organizations. Do you know what I mean? That it's not the sole ownership of the Linux Foundation. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. Again, the idea is, for example, if you at Microsoft have a recommendation saying replace master slave with primary secondary, and Splunk has a similar recommendation saying, yes, please replace that with primary secondary. And if that's the majority recommendation, then we can say, as this group, we can say the majority recommendation from what we have seen published online and published through our member companies is replace master slave with primary secondary. And here are the companies which have kind of already come forth with this recommendation. This is where we're basing this idea of quote unquote quorum on.
Okay.
And
Okay,
Monica,
that makes sense. Just wanted to check.
Monica, I'm glad you chimed in, pun intended, because Microsoft, as far as I know, Microsoft doesn't have a list per se, but your style guide has a lot of recommendations about master slave, blacklist, whitelist. And so I think those 3 bullets at the top here, they don't have to be a list per se, like Splunk's list, but it could be individual recommendations that are in a style guide somewhere.
Yes, that's right. The only reason I think, I'm sorry. We went into more detail for docs and code. I mean, our style guide is kind of for general communication, be it marketing docs or whatever it happens to be. The recommendations that we came up with for specifically for docs and code go into slightly more detail. And that's what I'd love to be able to share. And frankly, I think it's public too, but based on this discussion, I do want to double check as well. But you're right, we would link to our external style guide. So yeah, thank you for kind of mentioning that it's made available in multiple ways. That we
and others of you may have a similar situation.
Yeah. And again, I think we would like to eventually accept things that are not currently public. But there's an ongoing discussion around governance and what this organization looks like in that regards that needs to resolve before I think we can get into the discussion of how does this organization take contributions that aren't otherwise available. So we kind of need to clear a certain legal bar before we do that, I think. And we don't want to rush that conversation, but we do want to get some work done.
And this is Michelle from BMC. So I can tell you, we have style guides for marketing, for technical publications, etc. But they are internal and they will always remain internal. However, when you're looking for examples or feedback, we can certainly provide specific examples, when we're thinking about what are the recommendations we want to have. So there's some conversation where we say, well, we did this instead, and maybe someone else who's public has it, or we're not even pointing to the public anymore. We've just decided as a group, we like this approach or not. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that everyone's style guides become part of, the public collection and,
Yeah.
on there. And, even I think about, like if I were to try to get legal clearance, well, there's one thing to say, okay, we can share it with you. It's not disclosing anything about BMC. We can disclose it in this group, but then it becomes another situation if we're saying, well, here is, publicly what BMC says about this, and I'm sure there are other people, if you're, in a, like at Microsoft or Splunk or other places that are, in a non-open sourcing, situation that are like that.
Sorry, I'm just going to make a note because this is important for me to remember, which is that there's at least three dimensions to this issue, which is things that are publicly available and referenceable versus things which are publicly available and referenceable, like.
Yeah, and maybe it's also a matter of, and perhaps this is something to even go into those people who are working on the guidelines of how we work, is that, well, if it's not supposed to be publicly available, you can't share the document, but maybe you have inputs that are from that into the conversation as to, what our language is.
Yeah, I think it's that it's the input part that's really got me most curious. It's one thing to say, oh, here's a term that you might want to be careful of, but being able to explain and provide context and why you should be conscious of it here and not there. There's a whole lot of thinking that goes into this, and I don't know, it's not what I would even really call copyrightable necessarily. I mean, I could write 3 or 4 paragraphs and then now it's a copywritten work, but in terms of like having a discussion about why I would avoid a particular term, I don't need to give an example, but something, then, and I don't know, and it seems to me that's one of the values I see here of the group, is getting that, is that all the thinking that we're not just doing here, but that's come into this over the last several years or decades or lifetimes for people into, because the objection handling, people, every word and every term we put out there, the better quality thought out reasoning around why you want to be careful around this one and what you want, when you want to be careful about it, when it's okay, when it's not, that kind of thing. The better quality of that stuff, the better impact we're going to have, the better, more people are going to take us seriously. And it's that kind of stuff I'm worried about getting kind of lost in the legal won't approve our list of discussion points that we use internally kind of thing.
Yeah. So can I ask you a favor, Carson? Can you summarize what you just said for the notes, please? Would you mind taking some notes? Because I think those are all important points, and I think you've raised some of them in Slack as well. Because I think the sense that I'm getting is we're not ready to send out this email. It needs a bit more refining, and we need to like think very specifically about how we accept things, what we can't accept, and what the not contribution method, the ways in which people who can't and won't publish things, and that's totally valid, in what way that they can still have like valid means of entry into this work.
Is there value in not attributing to certain companies? Is there value in a collection of the information and synthesis of it without attribution? Because with attribution, we're going to have to also likely take ours down and go through legal, and I'm sure many other companies have to do that. But is there value or a way to do it without attribution?
You mean to start, or eventually when we aggregate it together?
Possibly both. I don't know.
For the latter, I see that if the attribution comes from INI, right? The goal is to get convergence. But is your point on lack of attribution for the initial one just so you can share things?
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it goes
yeah, okay.
It goes through a legal process for definitely for us. And so I mean, we can share it. And if it's more of a synthesis of collective data and saying, you know, 12 companies have landed on this or whatever, then you use that data point or that information without attribution so that we can have insight into each other's information. But the second you attribute it, I'm going to have to get legal.
It becomes an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that approach. And I think also what might be helpful in the email is to say, like, what are we planning to do with this collection? Is this just so that we can gather our set of potential terms, in which case you don't even necessarily need everyone to do that. If there's a place where if you've done some work, but then other people can just contribute their terms to some Google Doc or something, then they don't have to send the doc necessarily. Just
I'm happy to maybe just share some ideas based on what some of the other work streams are doing, in particular the company enterprise work stream. So the company enterprise work stream is planning to make a contribution to this work stream in terms of terms that are being deprecated and suggested replacements. And the way that work stream is handling that is, or at least the way it's been proposed, is basically creating like using an Excel spreadsheet and people just adding to it based on their knowledge from their own company without attribution. So there's basically a jointly authored document where we can collect information rather than companies actually providing copies of their own sample, their own policies, which would require clearance and review. I think we could probably gather information at a few different levels. One is maybe after we have the legal and governance framework set up a little bit better, there could be a Google Drive repository or a Box.com repository, because some companies don't allow use of Google Drive, but a repository where companies can just share for informational purposes, not licensing the IP, but just for informational purposes, privately share documents for consideration. And then the public documents could be posted on GitHub, as it's already been suggested. And then there's also the level of just jointly authored documents, because there is copyright in an actual expression of the idea, but the actual ideas and concepts themselves are not copyrightable. Those aren't owned by anybody.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I like that idea as well. That was really, really smart. Thank you so much. What I was about to ask is, I like the idea of a spreadsheet. And I actually wonder if that's something that we can start internally with this group and not worry about attribution for now. And if somebody wants to spearhead starting up a spreadsheet and collecting, kind of nudging our friends to provide recommendations, and let's kind of get it started.
So why are we asking two different groups to start spreadsheets? I brought this up.
That's fair.
And Monica, you're the co-lead for company. Maybe you could give a point of view here, because it doesn't make sense to me that we have two sets of spreadsheets circulating. I just don't think it's efficient.
Well, I think the idea was, we did discuss this in the the organization enterprise meeting this week, and we decided that even though we wanted to share our initial terms with this language group, that our scope was bigger in the sense that we wanted to include not just these terms as they apply maybe to docs and code, but also marketing material, training material, etc. So this was kind of an initial gesture, because the organization / enterprise group did come up with some terms. I mean, that's why we're all here in some sense. So, but we want to avoid duplication of effort. Nevertheless, because we had done the spade work on some terms, we were going to, compile these findings in a spreadsheet and hand them off to the language group. But ultimately, the language group would be the one to kind of, sort of kind of finalize and communicate and that kind of thing. And we would take those terms and sort of, how do they apply in a training context? How do they apply in company guideline context? You see, so it's a different, you sort of go in a different direction. Does that make sense?
Could we use a common template, at least for the minimum template for both? I'm just picturing
Actually,
people who are in companies but not on the enterprise or company work stream having to fill in the one that's coming from this work language, and then those who are in enterprise filling in a different one, and then work to be done to consolidate. So there's a common set of columns that are common to both. Why not just say, okay, this is the one we're going to ask everyone for, plus enterprise will add these additional columns. Could we do something like that?
Right. I think that's a great idea. And frankly, I did send down the notes from our last meeting, and Andre from Dell was going to create the spreadsheet, and then I was going to forward it. So I can forward it both to this group and to the kind of the enterprise group. And again, I think using the same spreadsheet is a great idea, and Andre is going to create that soon. But I just want to kind of repeat that we're not intending to duplicate effort here. This is just because we already had done some work on terms, so we wanted to share that with the language group. That's the point.
Well, that's
but I will share the spreadsheet as soon as I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's great. If you guys are starting the spreadsheet, we can always refine it.
Yeah, and I think maybe before anybody goes through a lot of effort in actually populating the spreadsheet, maybe making sure that this language work stream has bought into the column headers, because I can see other work streams as well, like standards work stream might want to contribute to that same spreadsheet. There are going to be other work streams that will want to contribute. So if we're all using the same format, it'll be easier later to merge all the different contributions into a single document and then dedupe.
Yeah, I actually wonder, Monica, if the best way to do this, I agree. I think and thank you for calling this out, Dale. I think it needs to kind of all go into the same spreadsheet, or we might find ourselves in a pickle. But B, I also agree with Joanna that I think at a minimum, the language workstream needs to buy in. I think the SDS workstream needs to buy in that we're collecting the right data. I think the company workstream needs to, and I really think the open source workstream probably should as well. So I think anybody who might generate a recommendation from their particular vertical needs to do this. And so what I'm going to ask is, can Andre ping the leads list or the leads channel before we send this out? And I will ping Andre to let. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, that sounds okay. If you're gonna ping him, Andre, then I'll kind of pile on to that. It's so that
Monica is the co-lead, so she could do it, Celeste, if you wanted to.
That's a great idea.
Have Monica do it.
Yeah, that would actually, no, you're again right. I'm probably doing too much. Monica, could you please ping Andre?
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Mark.
I have to drop now, but I think this is a very good outcome. So I'm grateful that we're doing it this way. Thanks for all the suggestions about, there's no reason not to align from the start rather than later on. So,
okay.
And again, I think going forward, we won't be duplicating efforts. So, okay. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Okay. So we are at time, and I don't want to keep anybody too much longer. I think let's leave it here. I'm going to start some Slack threads based on what we talked about in this meeting, so that we can keep the conversation going. Okay. Thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Bye now.
Celeste.
Thank you.